Listen to this episode if you have ever wondered how to create a brand that truly does stand out. Today, we are welcomed by Sacia Ashe. She owns the Ashe Design Haus, which is a Shopify and brand design agency where she creates bespoke, trend-sending creative for your brand. I am so excited to talk about all things creative and branding and websites and all of that here today. So without further ado, let us introduce Sacia. Sacia, it is so great to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
So tell our followers, kind of here, the listeners, what do you do when it comes to branding? I think the big question really is like, what really is branding, creative direction, and all of that when it comes to product-based businesses? I think some people think their product can kind of just sell itself. What is branding, and how are you really creating that through your brands?
Yeah, of course. So, at the root of what we do, and really why I started the agency, is we build brand worlds. And if you're confused about that term or it feels like, what the heck does that even mean? If you've ever walked into a retail store, whether it's like Ulta or Sephora, I used to use the example Target, not so much anymore. And you go to those areas of the store where it's like a pop up, and the entire section of the shelf feels like you've walked into a different
Yes.
private store experience. That is what we do. We're building a brand world that your customer instantly feels immersed in, which can feel tricky to do, especially if you're online. But it's actually such a superpower to be online and have a digital presence because you can build out that brand world like in this digital, exciting way. And that's
Yeah.
what we focus on is merging like your physical retail presence, your online presence, and creating this cohesive brand world that people are just obsessed with.
Yeah. So, like, every time they come in contact with you, they have the same feeling and they feel like they're immersed in the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's so fun. And I think a good example of it is like when you walk through the mall. I feel like I haven't been to the mall in like a decade, but when I went to malls, you would walk into like Victoria's Secret and it felt very like girly, feminine, frilly versus walking into like, what's the like skater store? There was like Spencer's or like Zoomies or like something like that. Like it's totally different vibes, but you're so immersed in it when you're in it because that was the brand that they were trying to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even see this in small brands, whether or not they have a brand world. I think
Yeah.
the easiest way to diagnose it is like, A, if you go to their Instagram or wherever you focus on with social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, like whatever primary platform you have, and you either remember that brand after you leave or you don't. If you're in a big festival or a farmer's market, someone goes to your pop-up, like they either
Yes.
remember you or they don't. And that's the difference between having a brand world and like not really having one.
Yeah, you know when you like are so immersed into a brand and you're excited about it and you're just like, how have I never felt this before? Like, how have I never known that this brand exists? Versus like a passing by brand, like a lot of farmers market brands are, is because they don't feel like they need a brand, but yet that's why a lot of their conversions don't actually convert over into online repeat customers for them too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually been talking with a lot of the founders we've been working with recently who have scaled their business to a pretty significant point through like wholesaling
Yeah.
or hustling at markets and things like that. But the issue is you can get so far in just like the wholesale market realm. If you have a strong personality, like you have a work ethic, you're going to get pretty far in that. But that doesn't always translate to digital or direct to consumer marketing because
No.
you need that brand presence. And if you know that your product is good, especially if you have a really strong like wholesale partnership, then you know you have product market fit. You know people want what you sell. Now
Yes.
it's like, how do we show them that through your brand?
Yeah. You have the proof of concept already. Now it's getting more of that digital first approach. And I don't think that digital first marketing is going away anytime soon. I really think, we're seeing the transition even away from people's like website being that first major touch point to really being social media. Like I know when I see a brand somewhere, I'm not instantly like Googling or like trying to type in their website to go to their website. I'm going to their Instagram and hoping their Instagram tells me everything that I need to know about their business.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing, especially with like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we were talking about
Yeah.
the change in the way that they buy on my podcast with you. One big change I've noticed is we kind of go to Instagram or social media as a means of vetting a product. Like my mom, for example, will Google something or try to find like info that way. But my first place is social media, reading the comments, what are people saying? And
Yes.
having a brand is kind of like that level of trust that you didn't have to have before when people were just looking you up on consumer review or whatever.
Yes, for sure. And like I remember even when I was doing hiring for my family's company, I felt like I could look at somebody's Instagram that we were going to hire and like get a good idea of like who they were, or at least like who they were trying to be and like what they were all about, because we grew up on Instagram and Facebook and like everything else. Versus my mom was like, I don't really even know what to look for on somebody's Instagram. And it's the same thing from a marketing, like branding perspective, is I am going on your Instagram and hoping that your profile tells me everything I need to know about what's going on, what problem you're solving, and all of that. I don't even technically go on somebody's website until I'm like pretty ready to buy. And I think that's something that's really interesting here. The question that I get asked a lot, and like I'm working with new brands right now, I work with brands kind of pre-revenue where they have the idea and we're bringing it to fruition as well. And right now I'm working with a brand. It's like a really great product, but we haven't actually created her overall brand yet. And basically what she did is she created 4 very different vibes. And now we're like kind of trying to sift through it and being like, okay, like which one actually makes sense for your product? So how do you really strategically know how to choose like the vibe that's right for you? If your product is here, how do you really know which aesthetic or like which vibe to really choose when it comes to your brand?
Yeah, that's actually such a good question. And it's interesting because the founders I've seen have the most success and like the brands that personally I am so obsessed with that our
Yeah.
agent has done have been the founders who come in with a bit more of an open mind and less of a pre-established creative direction, but they
Yeah.
really strong understanding of who they want to target. It's so much more important to really understand who's my target audience, what do they love? I'll give you like a tangible example. So I just wrapped up working with a financial advisor. She's starting a golf brand for women in finance because that's like a big emerging industry.
Yes.
She's a golfer herself. She knows that industry in and out. She knows what they're looking for, what's missing, what they love, how she wants to like serve the white space in the market. She knows every single detail of that. She now just needs the support to bring that to life creatively. And that's like the best place to be. So I would actually work backwards and like start with who's your target market? What world would they want to live in? And then you can look at, okay, there's a couple of different ways we can approach this. Like we can either speak to the segment of my target market that would love like a bolder, edgier brand, or we can
Yeah.
the ones who like kind of want a more clean, refined brand. And deciding that way is easier than trying to sift through how you personally feel about certain brands. Because I
Yes.
don't know about you, but I have so many eras of aesthetics that I go through that if I chose the branding of my current agency
Yes.
by myself, like I would have switched it 8 times by now. But
Yes.
I wanted it to speak to a certain demographic.
Totally. And like you're creating a brand that's supposed to be magnetizing and attractive to the person you're trying to attract. And so we have to kind of pick that ideal customer and then choose a brand that really fits to that person, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too, because you mentioned she's pre-revenue, is whether or not you have established brand,
Yeah.
if you have any type of established audience, and this does not have to be online, who is aligned with your product. I wouldn't ask like any random person on the street, but who you know is like
Yeah.
really in your demographic, ask them. See what they align with, because oftentimes it'll surprise you and they might not align with what you thought they would just based off of your stereotypical preconceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear that. And I think that's a great thing to do, is like really try to get like immersed. And I'd say this even through markets. Like I think it's a great reason that people go to markets, is just because you get to talk to people and like you get to see who stops and like what they say about your brand. And like you can kind of hear a little bit of that. I'm not huge into markets just because I feel like they're a funding strategy. They're not really a growth strategy sometimes, but it is a great way to get some market research. I think that's really awesome. A question that I think a lot of people out there have, because I get asked it all the time, is really like, okay, I'm developing a brand, but what do I actually like tangibly need to know deeper than colors, fonts,
Yeah.
logo, name, things like that? Like when you're delivering a creative direction or like a brand outline or whatever that looks like what are the like little details that you're really adding into there to help people really build more of a world, rather than like, here's a logo, here's your fonts, and here's your colors? Because truthfully, I've seen a lot of brand outlines that people have paid to get from other people like yourself that I'm like, holy cow. And I know you do way more than that. And where I'm like, this is like, I hope you didn't pay too much for it, but I know that you do kind of like a full world as opposed to just like, here's your colors and your fonts.
Yeah, if you're feeling hesitant about whether or not your brand guide is well established, or you're like, why do I even need a brand guide? Like, I'm just the one who's doing my branding.
Yes.
You really have to place yourself into the shoes of like the CEO that you eventually want to be and the team that you eventually are going to have. And so you, especially as a product founder, need to reserve creative energy in the future for product development, for conceptualizing how you're going to grow the company, for working with a strategist like you. Like there are so many areas that you're dipping your toes into. And so when it comes to building out a brand that's able to translate to a world, whether or not you're involved, you have to have a brand system. And so that looks like not just colors, but how do you apply those colors? Why do those colors go there? Why are you never going to use purple on a button? Because it's like not a very good call to action color. That's is building out a brand system that your team is going to be able to use. And I think the real test of time is like, would your VA be able to bring your brand guide to life on an actual like Instagram post or piece of
Yes.
print versus having to hire like an in-house designer, which eventually is great to have. But if your brand guide's not like easy enough to follow that your VA can't bring it to life well, then it's not a good brand system. So
Yeah.
that's very logistically when it comes to building out a brand world versus just like a brand guide, we really have to think about what a brand is. And the biggest thing that I see missing from people who are trying to build a brand and that they just can't figure out why it doesn't match their vision,
Yeah.
the creative direction and the photography side.
Yes.
And so when you're looking at these big brands like Sporty and Rich or Rode, if you took their brand assets, you could literally make those
Yes.
in Canva, to be honest. Like they're not crazy.
No.
You put them on great imagery and they come to life. And so that's like really where you can help your brand shine is understanding how are we going to creatively bring this to life with photography, with videos, with packaging, and
Yes.
apply the brand, not just have it sit there in a brand guide.
Yes. Okay. I love what you said is that if you took your products out of it, you would still be able to see cohesion here, but it's really just like placing it back in. And this is what I say too is like whenever I'm helping people like try to DIY develop a brand, when they're planning a product photo shoot, they're like, how do I do this? My question is like make your mood board and then basically identify what themes, products, accessories, items in this mood board is really making it feel the way that you really want it to. And then that's what you need to add into your product photos. That's what you need to add in to kind of create more of that. You know, I like that you do branding and creative direction because those two things have to go so hand in hand where, okay, this is the brand guide. These are the colors. These are like all of the things, but it's also when you take photos or when you use stock photos or whatever, these are the items that we can kind of use into this to create the world, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like when you see a brand that looks great on social media because they don't really use imagery or things like that, but they
Yeah.
look at the website and there's like a giant stock image that's weird. That's where the disconnect happens. And so it's not that brand assets aren't important. That's my life. That's my whole thing is brand
Yeah.
assets. But you have to apply them across the board and with imagery and like really be devoted to bringing it to life. Otherwise, it's kind of like going to fall flat and it's going
Yeah.
to feel like a waste of money, even if the designer did a great job because they didn't have that creative direction
The
to guide.
execution of what it looks like is tough. Yeah.
Hey, I'm jumping in here for 30 quick seconds for those of you who are loving the podcast but wish we could dive deeper into every episode topic together. I have actually started a completely free podcast community called the Small Business Cafe for exactly this purpose. Inside this community, we dive deeper into every podcast episode, provide bonus resources, and actually host completely free monthly coaching calls with me so you can get your questions answered. Plus, you get to submit your questions for our Friday coaching session episodes and connect with other founders too. If you have been loving being a part of this podcast and want to connect with other brand founders, plus get extra support from me, click the link in the show notes below to join.
So when we're looking at this, like I know you create very like standout kind of trend-setting brands. What do you feel like the difference in results looks like from like a mediocre DIY brand to like a very high quality developed brand? Like where do you feel that really sets them apart? The question I get asked a lot is like, why do I need somebody to create a brand when I can go into Canva? You know, what are the different results that you're really going to get if you kind of DIY it, throw it together versus having you deliver it kind of like on a silver platter of these are the things to use. This is what I would recommend. And like, this is a very like high quality put together brand.
Yeah, I think A is, I'm going to try to say this in the nicest way, but it's a difference in mindset in founder. And so I
Yeah.
think the founder who thinks that they can DIY it in Canva forever is also the founder who's not going to ever want to necessarily like invest in the full
Yeah.
branding, which is important. And I honestly know some incredible creative directors who do use Canva for their branding because their clients like need that, but they're able to do great work because they're a creative director and they know how to like keep that consistent. The difference between doing it yourself and bringing it to life with an expert is they are able to get like that external lens and see what you don't see in your brand, and they're able to direct it in a cohesive way if they're like good at what they do and make it into this world that people are immersed in and have consistent touch points at every single point that your brand is going to interact with them, versus like, okay, you have a logo and you put it on stuff, but people don't really recognize what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think people put so much weight into a logo when like I feel that the brand world like matters way more than what little icon is in your logo. And like I think what you create is kind of like that full. I think a lot of people they're like, "Okay, I need to create a brand. I'm going to figure out a font and I'm going to like throw together some random vector image on Canva and like call it good." But like what you're saying is like, it doesn't really matter what software you're using. You can use Canva. And I mean, a lot of my stuff is in Canva and like we can create it that way. But what's really separates the two is it's really more of the strategy behind it and the cohesion behind it that you're able to put into that.
Yeah. Another thing I like to, just on that note, like reminds people is community is such a buzzword right now, and people want to build community for a good reason. Like during COVID, we were pulled back from that. Consumers are feeling the rise of AI and they really want human interaction.
Yeah.
So many reasons why community is important right now. But if you're trying to build a community around the product and that product does not look good, then people aren't going to want to share it, have it on their shelf, feature it in their
Yes.
videos, promote it for free as an influencer. Versus you see the brands that are talking about having zero marketing spend, it's because they had the brand to.
The brand that speaks for itself 100%. I see my clients that have like custom packaging, high quality branding, and they've invested in like the just visual element of their brand have so much stronger ROI in those influencer marketing when they are featured in news articles, all of that, because people see it and they say, "Oh, this is a professional brand. How have I never heard about this? Let me go learn more," as opposed to it feeling kind of lackluster. You just pass right over it. Like people don't even really notice it. They don't see how cool it is. I think that's such a great point. Something that I've seen just from being in the industry for so long and like working with so many different brands is there are trends in brands. I want to talk about the difference between being kind of like a trendy brand, because I see that as a big issue, is if you started to like design a brand that's like fit into a trend right now because that trend is going to go away, versus building kind of more of a trend setting brand that really separates you from everybody else. What is your opinion on like trendy brands or like using a trend to fuel your brand?
This is an interesting conversation, and I used to have a different perspective on this, but I am not one to not admit when I feel like I made a mistake. I used to be really big anti-trend. Like, you can't build a brand on trends. I used to like really fight against the fact that I was Gen Z and like knew what was up and coming and be timeless. Even the biggest, most luxury brands right now and the biggest average consumer brands like Walmart, Target, things like that,
Yes.
they are all rebranding to fit what is trending. And there is a big difference between understanding the trend of the market and understanding a social media trend. Social media trend will last for like 3 seconds. Please don't build your brand off of leopard print.
Yes.
Like, nobody wants that really. But there's certain trends that are coming to life in the market. So, for example, like this 90s retro aesthetic
Yes.
is really coming back. And that is something that's going to come back every 10 years. And so you might have a period in time where maybe your brand imagery needs to speak to a different trend that's going on or different kind of thing that's appealing to people in the market. But long term, your brand is going to continue to come back into trend. And so it's looking at like what are the broad scale things that the market is wanting. People are wanting like nostalgia aspect. People are wanting elements of fun, like the fun 80s photo shoots are coming back. And so that's how you can incorporate trends in a more lasting way rather than like seeing that every single brand on the market is using Chrome and deciding you want to have a Chrome brand. That's where trends kind of don't work very well.
Yes. So what I'm hearing you say is that like the foundation of your brand shouldn't be trendy, but your brand visuals can follow and adapt with consumer trends.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really important. I think if you get too stuck into being anti-trend, then you can fall out of relevance a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I even look at Rode, like we've talked about it a couple of times, is Rode has a great brand. She did a great job building that brand, but there are elements of trendiness in her visuals. Like she does still use that like clean girl aesthetic trends. Even like I feel like espresso martinis had like a huge comeback. And, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe it's just like since I've been of age of drinking, but I feel like I didn't hear about espresso martinis for a long time. And now they're kind of back and everybody's talking about it. They have espresso martinis in all of their marketing. So like their marketing is still clean and like, well, like kind of like that science backed, whatever, but they use visuals that are going to attract people that may be trendy.
Yeah, and it's funny too because they speak to like multiple different consumers in a
Yeah.
really cute way. You go on their website, and I'm just like a nerd, so that's why I did this deep dive. But if you go on their website, there's actually a section where they're talking with the doctor who formulated the product,
Yes.
the science behind it, the research behind it. If you asked me when I first found Rode, like, is Rode science backed? I would not know that because they don't talk about it
Yes.
front facing necessarily. But they have like all of these elements to speak to the buyer psychology throughout the brand. And that again speaks to like building a brand world that's cohesive, is knowing how do we speak to each different person in our market and
Yeah.
trying to target.
Okay, so if people are listening to this and they're saying, okay, Sasha, I know my brand is like not to the par of where it should be. I know that it's probably lacking. I would say 75% of my clients that come to me are like, I know that I could improve with it. I think it's okay, but like, who knows? What do you say as like tangible strategies to get started with elevating a current brand?
Yeah, so if you have a brand now, I would assess whether you're going to commit to a full rebrand or if you might just need a few audits.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of brands who I see who DIY'd their initial brand who don't need a full rebrand, but there are some brands that are started by like graphic designers where that's fine. So it starts with really auditing like where you're at. Some indicators that your brand needs a full refresh, that you need a rebrand, is if you're seeing a lack of audience engagement and visibility, but you do well in like farmers markets, wholesaling, things
Yeah.
like that. If you're getting rejected by a lot of retail buyers and they're not even like looking at your application or even speaking
Yeah.
with you, huge sign that your branding is off. If you want to pitch to investors and you just can't like figure out why the investors aren't interested, even though you feel like everything's in place, it might be a brand issue with you there. You have product market fit and like strong backing to your brand on the financial and metrics side. So those are all indicators that a rebrand could be really helpful. On the website side as well, if you're seeing like low average order value or low like shares of your website and people aren't really coming back or referring their friends,
Yeah.
that's another sign that the brand could be an issue.
Yeah, yeah, those are really good. It's like you're having eyes and you have people there, but they just aren't like magnetized to the point that they should be, whether that be from a pitching standpoint or a consumer standpoint. I totally agree with those. Is looking kind of deeper into it and being your brand. I think a big one there is like you do well in markets and people buy it and they love it, but it's hard to do that expansion. And that's because people just aren't feeling like they're drawn to your brand or they're just not feeling that connection there. And I can totally see that. I think that's really great. Sasha, if we were to leave you to leave like your legacy on the podcast, if this is your like one tip that you recommend business owners have, whether it be a mindset around business that you think everybody should have, whatever that may be, what would you tell a business owner out there today to kind of leave your 2 cents and your words of wisdom with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, as a founder myself and someone who works with a lot of you amazing founder humans, you are so much more creative than you think. And a designer or a mentor or a family member or anybody tells you that your vision isn't going to work or you're not creative or you don't know what you're talking about, it's not true. Take people's guidance, but also like really listen to your intuition. You started this business for a reason. And at the end of the day, like at your core, you know why you're doing it, and just don't
Yeah.
lose that why and the vision that you had going into the business before you had the noise of it, what everyone's telling you have to do. Because there's really not one right path for anything.
I think that's so important. And people really do have the audacity to share their opinions a little too much about what they think is going to work or not when they have no real idea. I feel like there's always a way to make it work as long as you're willing to like put the energy, the effort, and the time into making it work. I think that's a great thing to do. Sasha, where can people find you? Where are you on Instagram? We also did a podcast over on her podcast. Send people over there.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is Ashe, ASHE Design House, but spelled HAUS.com. Same for my Instagram. And if you want to reach out or chat about your brand, when you do brand audits, I'm always happy to throw one of those out there for your audience as well.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks so much. It was so great to chat with you today. And thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with the audience.
If you found today's episode helpful and are looking for more tangible ways to grow your business, make sure you are subscribed to the show. If you want to dive deeper into this topic more, click the link in the show notes and join our completely free podcast community where we dive into every single podcast topic as well as give some bonus support and free coaching calls. And finally, if you are interested in getting my eyes on your business to find your hidden opportunities to scale, apply to work with me one-on-one in the show notes or on our website. Remember, it's not enough to listen. Don't forget to implement too. I love ya. I'll see you in the next episode.